Welcome to Out the Back Door, where your host Adrian Apostolatus talks about everything from your back door to the back fence and all the bits in between.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Out the Back Door. I'm here with an old and dear friend of mine, Rob Rooney from Equilibrium Pools. And pool renovation and new pool builds is something that comes up for me all the time. So I thought I would bring the expert in today to share some of his wealth about his time in the pool industry and give everyone here some nuggets of gold that they can take away with them. So, mate, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Mate, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's really nice to be here.
No, thank you. Well, tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, we've known each other for probably the best part of 10 years and you've got a vast experience in people's backyards. So how did you end up here today?
Look, I've been in industry for approximately 20 years. I went through and did a structural landscaping apprenticeship at Ryde Horticultural TAFE. And I did that just because I loved it. I loved the industry. I love construction and I love being outdoors.
Yeah.
From there, went on and essentially owned and operated a landscape firm that did very well. And
that's how we met.
That's how we met.
Yep.
And I moved on from there into teaching at Ryde Horticultural TAFE in structural landscaping or landscape construction on a part-time basis while I set up my pool building company. I got into pool building because as a landscaper I used to deal with a lot of pool builders and I thought that there's got to be an easier way to do this.
A better way to do it, yeah.
Yeah. And that leads us to where we are now. You know, once again, we're outdoors, we're working in construction, we love what we do, and we're very passionate about it.
I can tell. And knowing you and the quality and your integrity and seeing your social media stories and videos, and you do things a little bit differently. And I think that's why you and I connect, because of not only your passion but your values for what you stand by. And I think in today's building game, I think we can all share stories about the good and the bad, but I think for me, you do things once, you do it the right way and you're honest about it and you're upfront, and I think that bears fruit in the long run. And I know that's the game that you play as well too. So, which brings me on to my first question in terms of people's backyards and essentially pool building. Where do you see people getting stuck in terms of that process?
There's a number of areas where I see people getting stuck. Those areas particularly are based around information, knowing the legislation and knowing the laws.
So that would go that's going right back to the beginning before you're even putting a shovel in the ground, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. Essentially, this is going back to the design stage.
Yeah.
And I think like all good building or landscape or pool building, it's got to start with a quality design, and that quality design, has to not only be aesthetic and have great form and function, but it's got to tick the boxes legally.
Yeah.
I find people getting stuck when they don't have access to the right information.
So in terms of, I guess sometimes people can segment things. So whether they almost do a design themselves or get a designer, and then the builder isn't involved. So A isn't talking to B, and then they think they've got the perfect design, but then the builder would come out and say, well, you haven't thought about this, or there's an easement in the way, or X, Y, Z, and then that's where things get stuck. Would that be right? Or
yeah, that's definitely part of it, and a large part of it in communication. It's always good to work with a design team that knows and understands about construction.
Yeah, I find the same.
Yeah, someone that works essentially and knows spans of timber or dimensions of bricks and blocks and all of these, cornerstones that we use in the industry. widths and lengths of tiles, so we're essentially coming back to, I don't want cut tiles in here as a finish, I want a nice full width tile. So things like that to come and consider. And then we work backwards from there. Like you look at the big picture now, if we don't have someone that can essentially have that construction knowledge and be able to work back, then they come over with a great design that's not considered to be a working drawing.
Yeah.
And from there, you will find a builder will pick holes in it and say, well, we can't do this or we can't do that, or how do you want me to build this? So it's always good to have someone that's got that construction knowledge who is doing your design.
Because ultimately then that would help people not get so peed off in terms of the process, because then they're not going backwards and forwards, and then ultimately it's not going to cost them as much money because they've got a smoother process. So I get everyone's happier in the long run.
Yeah, I definitely would agree that it speeds up the process, and obviously it takes a lot of stress out of it. Working with people and particularly like designers and builders who have good knowledge of legislation based on legalities that we can and we can't do around construction in your backyard. You mentioned easements before.
Yep.
Super important to make sure that we can navigate an easement, work outside of zones of influence and stuff like that. That knowledge is priceless when you're in this stage, essentially, of designing and getting ready to build a project.
And you'd want to know that type of information early, essentially, because I know for me, I'd imagine for you, 1,000 times more, easements would pop up quite a few times. So if you don't know about that, or if people want to brush that aside, then that's going to lead to their frustration in the long run. But how do you deal with that, or what's your process in terms of getting that information together at the beginning?
Look, when we go out and we meet clients for an initial site meeting to discuss their views and essentially ask what they're after, and in a main way look at 1,000 Pinterest photos that have been downloaded, and this is what I want, and that sort of stuff. When we're signing up with that client, and that's just initial for us to give them a no obligation tender, we're starting to do dial before you dig searches on their property. We're starting to consider fence heights and right to privacy issues. We're essentially making sure that we take in consideration trees, power lines, all different sorts of things, that might affect the build, the end result, or essentially the process that's going to get you to that end result.
Yeah. No, it's good. I think you and I are similar in terms of having that little checklist at the beginning. I've said it numerous times already today. It's going to alleviate headaches down the long run. But I'd imagine at the beginning too, you'd have some other harder questions, which I think if you don't address then, like in terms of budget, etc., that otherwise, if they don't get brought up then, they're gonna pop up. The nail's going to pop up somewhere along the line. And if people are thinking this grand design pool with waterfalls and slippery slides and bits and pieces, then if they're on a beer budget but they've got a champagne design, it's the two aren't going to meet. So you address that early?
I think it's something that we have to address early, and if it's not addressed early, then essentially we're going to put it in the hands of an architect, whether it be a client-appointed architect or someone from our architectural team, and they're going to design you the champagne budget because obviously they want the best design and the best vision for your backyard, and then potentially that's going to be priced, and situations might stack up where we can't essentially shoehorn every one of those wish list items into a budget. And let's be honest, Adrian, every project that we work on essentially has a budget this size and a wish list this size, and we're constantly trying to move bits and pieces or shoehorn different areas into it. There's no project that's different. So knowing someone's budget early is not a situation of turning around to them and going, oh, great, we can grab that much off them. Knowing them is turning around and going, or knowing that budget, should I say, is turning around and being able to say, okay, well, we can make that work in there and we can make that work in there. And there's plenty of times where knowing someone's budget and knowing someone's wish list, we can, make allocations to put in allowances so they might be able to move on to the Alfresco and Cabana, things like that in the next 6 months when the budget replenishes. It might be essentially garden lighting or irrigation or something like that, where they turn around and we do stages of a project and we might get gardens in and we move on later on into the garden lighting and the irrigation because they don't just squeeze into that budget. So there's many ways to skin a cat.
But the two things, in terms of design and budget, they've got to dovetail in with each other, because 100%. I see it so often where you're right, they've got this magnificent design, but if they don't match, then it just leads to that disappointment. Often I'll start at the dream and then go, okay, well, the dream is the budget, then, okay, out of that dream, what's the top three? What are the must-haves? Let's make sure we can include those. And like you were saying, whether you stage the rest of it or you make allowances, but if you don't know that, and this is where I see other people getting stuck or frustrated or pissed off or whatever, then it's because they haven't had those conversations at the beginning and they think they're getting X when in reality they're getting Y. So,
definitely, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Look, working in industry, both in Australia and overseas through Europe and that, I've seen that story many, many times over.
Yeah,
having a good understanding of your budget early is key, and making sure that the people that you're working with having a good understanding of your budget is also key.
So don't be scared of having those honest conversations. Don't keep your cards close to your chest. Put everything out on the table, and that'll lead to a better result at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely in certain areas. I think with everyone, there's certain things that they keep close to their chest, but there's definitely important things about knowing your budget.
One thing you sort of touched upon before in terms of items to consider was legislation and I'd imagine also council too. For me, most of our work goes through an approval process, which I'd imagine would be the same for you.
Every one of my projects goes through an approval process. How
do you handle that, or how do you find DAs and CDCs or?
So, the way the system is set up currently, we try to push as many projects through CDC as possible.
For any reason in particular, or?
It's there's a few less costs and it's definitely a quicker process. Yeah. One would even say probably a little easier. The reason, let's say we build 24 pools a year. I don't build 1 million pools a year. We build 24 pools. We do that because we're structured and we like to start 2 a month. We like to turn over 2 in the middle and essentially finish 2 a month. And we find with our team and our skills, that suits our capacity. With that situation happening, I would say 20 of our pools on average go through CDC.
All right.
There's other pools that, CDC is a process. It's called a Compliant Development Certificate. It was put in place by the New South Wales state government, and it was to try and essentially remove people from sitting for months and months and months in waiting for DA and councils.
But essentially it still is a checklist, and it's a black and white
It's very black and white.
So if you miss one box, you're out of the game, whereas DA gives you more of that potentially, depending, a bit more flexibility. But it swings and roundabouts.
That's it. Yeah, that's where I was going. I was going to say, if we don't tick one box on that CDC, then we're over into a DA.
Mm.
Now, there's sometimes that we could get a pull through CDC, but it's not going to give the client the result that they're after.
Yeah.
Right. And essentially, it's going to be a better result on that swimming pool when it goes through a DA situation. The DA takes a bit longer. Your neighbours have to be notified, and not only that, but it takes longer because it goes through council process.
But coming back to what we were saying before, I think if you know what the client wants at the beginning, then a good designer should go through that process and essentially go, well, actually, if we could do it quicker, but it means that one of those key things that you wanted, you're going to have to go without, because that'll tick the box from a CDC point of view, but we could get everything you wanted, but it's going to take longer going through a DA. We
can sum that up very quickly, generally, in the case of our projects. We're generally talking with clients and getting their vision and that sort of thing, looking at their blocks, potentially looking at pervious and impervious ratios of houses and landscaped areas, or hard surfaces and soft surfaces, and looking at trees, looking at essentially height out of ground and stuff like that. And generally, very quickly, we can sum up whether that client would be, if that's what they want and that's exactly what they're set on, right, that we're going through a DA or a CDC process.
Yeah. But that's come through your experience and your checklist.
It's come through. A lot of work over many years.
Good. What are some of the things that people should start to think about, or some of the things they need to get right we've touched upon a few already, but in terms of when they're starting their pool design and their build process, what do you think are the top 3 things that people need to really focus on?
I think we've covered working with the right operator, or the right team, or I've heard it in other areas called your A team. So essentially getting yourself your architect who you'd like to work with, essentially your builder, your pool builder, your landscaper who you'd like to work with, and your certifier, and ensuring that, or your engineer, and ensuring that all of these people are speaking the same language.
Yeah.
Right. That's so important.
It's the mortar between the bricks that keeps everything flowing. And
it sure is. And you want to look for solutions-based people.
Yeah.
Right. That's so important. There's no project that we work on where there isn't an issue.
Yep.
Right. And that's been through landscaping, pool building. I work with a lot of Sydney's top builders, a lot of architects, a lot of engineers, and essentially we might be on the phone with someone for a project that's coming up, and the architects say, well, we've had this situation, how do we arise or move around this situation? How can we work this situation without cutting any corners and make sure we're ticking the boxes? So we're always looking for solutions.
Yeah.
And that happens on every project. You want solutions-based people on your projects. You want a holistic approach, So
what do you mean by that?
We walk into projects Sydney-wide. I mean, there's different areas, there's different sizes of blocks, there's different designs in houses.
So if you think, say, what we were saying before, say, difference between, say, an eastern suburbs block to somewhere out, say, Dural and bits and pieces, more acreage, smaller, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, different blocks have different requirements. They're different sizes. They've got different ratios. And there's different results that you're after for for each block. So, I mean, that needs to be considered holistically with the design. Somewhere where we can have, where we have great results is where we can have a swimming pool essentially talk to a beautiful outdoor area, a beautiful entertaining area, somewhere where the energy of the house flows from inside to outside.
Yeah.
We find clients that when we've got that pool that does talk to the house in such ways that they use that swimming pool 10 times more than what they would if they say to us, just tuck the pool around the side of the property. So, I'd say, getting the right people, essentially the holistic approach, a theme, that's definitely important, and having that theme tie back
in terms of design, or
definitely in terms of design and in terms of product, in terms of functionality, and having that theme work back with the design of the property, or the style, should I say, of the property, to create a theme. I think is very important.
And that could start from the house through the outdoor, the alfresco, into the pool, and everything again needs to flow within each other rather than just almost having something that ends up like a bit of a patchwork quilt in your backyard.
It definitely does start at the house. I mean, that's so important. And there's been times where we've gone out to tender projects and we'll have someone approach us and say, I just want you to price me for a pool over there. And we go, great, I mean, what's your vision for the property? And they say, well, in a year we're going to have extensions done to the house. Essentially, that's in design at the moment, but that doesn't worry you. And I'm like, it does.
Yeah,
it definitely does, and it worries me because I want to give you the best result. I don't want that pool out there sitting out there like a pimple.
Yeah,
where it could actually be something where
it's integrated.
Because there's two things that you want out of a swimming pool. I mean, aesthetic review. I mean, it's a big water feature in your backyard.
Yeah.
And back to functionality. You've got your family swimming in it. So in times of the year when people walk into your house and essentially walk out into your open entertaining area or your area that opens onto the backyard, that has to be a feature.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to dominate the yard, and in no way am I saying that it has to be the dominating factor in the yard, but it definitely has to complement everything that's there.
Yeah. I think in terms of, and what I'd written down next to sort of chat about was linking the alfresco and what you've just mentioned, essentially, starting at that back door, linking the alfresco to the pool. Where I see people struggling is exactly what you've just mentioned, where people are just saying, this is that one space and just focus on that, and you start poking and prodding and going, well, what about this? Well, how are you going to get from your back door through the deck down? Where's the stairs going to go? And where's your gate to the pool? And you can see the conversation almost slows right down. And you can see things, the wheels starting to tick because, no one's asked that before. Well, they're the things you got to think about early. Otherwise, you're going to be doing 15 loops and 6 zigzags to get from A to B, and then you won't be using either the alfresco space or the pool when you most want to.
Yeah, definitely not getting the value out of it that you could with a few minor considered changes.
Yeah, yeah. What else do you think people should really be focusing on? Is there anything else that, over your experience, whether it is even from your landscaping background or into the pool side of things, that pop up quite often?
I think the word timeless. If you're going to be looking at constructing something in your backyard or on your property, and you're going to be at that property for a lengthened period of time, then apart from maintaining it, you want it to look as good in 10, 15, 20 years' time as it does
at the beginning.
when you put it in. So many times we see people follow trends that they might see on the block or something like that, like one of the latest construction shows. And initial site visits, I can walk into someone's property and I go, well, you did that in 98, you did that in 2007, and they're like, well, yeah, how do you know? And I'm like, well, we were using a lot of that product, and so in that stage, there's no theme, and it's definitely not timeless.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make an investment like a pool or an alfresco area or a landscape, and it is an investment, it's something that we talk about a balanced lifestyle and equilibrium and that balance in our company, and that's what we like to essentially provide people in life. Well, you want it to reward you for many years to come.
You want to be able to use that investment. They're not spending $50. So I think often I tell people to go slower at the beginning to then go faster at the end. I see people going at a bull at a gate. I need this, why? What was your thought? Tell me your thought process. How did you get to that point? Because then it'll help me understand, and then we can add my 2 cents in and another 2 cents, and we can get a better result. I see people so often going so quick that they miss a lot of these things, and then that's where they struggle at the end.
Definitely. I think it all comes back to the design that we were talking about there.
Getting the start right.
Getting the design right. Yeah. Making sure that design ticks all of the boxes. Running that design past your architect, your engineer, all of your Sydney Water tap-ins and all of that, and making sure that all the parameters are ticked, and yet you're getting what you want, on a budget that works for you.
Yeah. Mate, I have written down more notes that I can poke a stick at today. Some of the things that I've listed down and taking away in terms of, we've just touched upon it then, in terms of getting the design right, but also your communication and your budget right at the beginning. I think so much of our conversation really comes back to that starting point, getting that right to get the end point right. But other words that you've used in terms of flow and integration, I use flow all the time. Holistic approach, a theme. I've never thought about a theme, but that's a good thing in terms of, I guess, flowing through the whole of the house.
Yeah, so when you think in particular about styles of houses and styles of landscape design, am I going for architectural planting, or have we got a theme where we're looking at some sort of semi-tropical style of thing, or are we going for a formal theme? Yeah. These things, we don't throw areas in hodgepodge.
Yeah.
We will aim to choose a theme, and then when we find that theme, we will lock onto it and move in that direction. Perfect.
Well, mate, I've taken so much out of this today. I'm sure. Well,
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having us along.
No, my pleasure. I think there's a lot of nuggets of gold there, and I think you and I think alike. So I think that was. There's a lot of elements there that people can hopefully make their experience a lot more enjoyable throughout their backyard renovations. But like, how should people reach out to you? What's the best way to get in contact with you if they're looking for a pool rebuild and getting their backyard up to speed?
You can find us on our website, www.equilibriumpools.com.au. You can contact us. All of our contact details are either on our website or on the web. We have social media, Instagram, Facebook. I don't know if I do this TikTok stuff or any of that. I'm probably a bit old for that sort of stuff.
Well, I'll put all your links in the show notes at the base, but definitely I'd recommend people to get in touch and And any questions, don't hesitate to send through. But again, thank you so much for being a part of us today.
Thanks for having me, mate. I really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.